JD Scholten.
This is me. For the younger people who aren't familiar, how many people familiar here with Shanana? Quite a few. Quite a few. So therefore, you will know exactly what I mean when I say that on the night of November 6th, 2018, JD Scholten has got to be doing this. Can you believe that I have been making a living now for almost 50 years doing this? God bless America. Tough. And yes, you know that I love the music of the 50s and the early 60s, but that does not mean that I want to return to the 50s and the early 60s. Because that was a time before Medicare. And in a time before Medicare, over 35% of American seniors had incomes below the poverty line. That is a huge number. And I certainly do not want to return to a time before Social Security was passed in 1935, when, think about this, more than 1 out of every 2 American seniors had incomes below the poverty line. Social Security and Medicare are the 2 most successful domestic programs in the entire history of the United States of America. And you know what, Iowa's 4th District? We need to keep them that way. In fact, we need to expand them. And that is why I've taken on this responsibility, completely voluntary responsibility. I'm running around the country unpaid, enjoying this time in the most important cycle of our lifetimes. By the time this is done, this is my 48th campaign stop. By the time I'm done, I will have gone from Alaska to South Florida and New Hampshire to Southern California in search of candidates who will protect and advance the quality of life of older Americans.
Test.
I think Steve King's got control of the sound system. I have found one such candidate here in Iowa's 4th District. And as you might guess, that candidate's name is JD Scholten. Now, I'm going to explain to you briefly how we arrive at this endorsement at Social Security Works PAC, of which I am the president. This is the questionnaire that we send out to candidates we are interested in. Very simple. I'll review it quickly. 5 questions. Will you support expanding, not cutting, Social Security? Please note that cutting includes raising the retirement age, using a less generous cost of living adjustment, means testing, or privatizing, the worst idea of all, Social Security, as well as the obvious reducing or eliminating benefits. So the question is, will you support expanding, not cutting, Social Security? And JD Scholten says yes. He supports expanding, not cutting Social Security. Will you support expanding, not cutting Medicare? Yes. Do you support the expansion of Medicaid eligibility contained in the Affordable Care Act? And will you oppose all attempts to cut Medicaid? Yes. And understand, a corner's being turned in America with regard to Medicaid. Medicaid pays for 2/3 of long-term care in America. And more American families are understanding and experiencing the importance of this, because the average cost of nursing home care, for instance, is $93,000 a year. So more and more American families are understanding the importance of Medicaid. Anybody here think they're paying too little for their prescription drugs? Will you support efforts to lower prescription drug prices, including allowing Medicare and other federal programs to negotiate for lower prices? Yes. JD Scholten says yes. And finally, my pet question of all of them. Will you always refer to Social Security and Medicare as earned benefits? Because that's what they are. You pay into them all your working lives, and the benefits are there when you need them. Will you never use the pejorative term used by Rich McConnell very famously a few days ago, where he said, if America enables them even further by failing to create at least one chamber of resistance in Congress, they are going to go right after those entitlement programs. But JD Scholten agrees that he will never use the word entitlements to describe what are your earned benefits. Never. So JD Scholten basically returns a perfect questionnaire. And not at all surprisingly, we met at Netroots Nation, a convention. JD worked that room unbelievably well. He was there the entire time. We became friends, and it's just a pleasure to be here for him. Now, a couple of words before we continue about the incumbent congressman here in Iowa's 4th District. What can you say about Steve King that hasn't been said before? Well, I have actually found something. This is the Alliance for Retired Americans scorecard. It takes 10 senior issues every year. It grades members of Congress on how they voted. You get 10 points or 10% for every time you voted correctly. You get 0 for every time you voted wrong. This will come as no surprise to you. What do you think Congressman Steve King's record for 2016 and 2017 was? It was a big fat, say it with me, 0. 0. His lifetime score is 4. 4 out of 100. What that means is that 96% of the time, Steve King has voted wrong on senior issues. But the thing that I get to tell you, the way of describing it that no one else can do in America, is that I am, in fact, the person in the United States best qualified to summarize Steve King's record on retirement security issues. Anybody here seen the movie Grease? Yeah. Are you aware that in the movie Grease, Sha-Na-Na is the band at the hop? We sing every song in that big scene at the hop, all 6 songs. And during the dance contest with Cha-Cha Di Gregorio and Danny Zuko, when they're doing the limbo, I am the guy who in 1978, I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. I didn't know I was doing this. I'm the guy who was describing Steve King's voting record on senior issues. Because I'm the guy who said, how low can you go? Say it with me. How low can you go? How low can you go, Steve King? How low can you go? Because Representative Steve King, and this applies to him in so many different ways, because nobody else in Congress, oh, he's working the sound system again, because he really doesn't want me to say this, but nobody else in Congress was in Austria talking to white nationalist publications when he should have been here in the 4th District in Iowa. Nobody else. There were so many ways in which Steve King is the embodiment of how low you can go. And that's why I stand before you today. On behalf of Social Security Works PAC, it is because JD Scholten is going to be so good when you send him to Congress, and because Representative Steve King has in fact found how low you can go, That is why I stand before you today to implore that you get every single voter here in the 4th District of Iowa to come out on November 6th and bum 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 dang a dang dang a ding a dong ding. Vote for JD Scholten. And here he is. He is the next congressman from Iowa's 4th District. Please welcome JD Scholten.
Man, how do I, what do I do now? I mean, this is absolutely amazing, and never did I think 15 months ago when we launched this campaign that there would be a moment like today that we're having in Fort Dodge, and I can't thank you enough for coming, and I can't thank Senator Sanders enough for coming. This is special. And right now we're in the middle of our 39 county, 39 town hall tour, and we call it the Can't Fake Showing Up tour. And it's about getting out to the people, because I modeled my campaign after two of my Iowa political heroes, Berkeley Bedell and Senator Harkin. And yeah, absolutely. And in these town halls, it's easy to talk about Steve King, but we don't. We mostly talk about issues. And I go around and I talk initially about how we need a healthcare system that works for all of us. The senator has an idea on it, and I like it. We talk about an economy that works for all of us, and we talk about a government that works for us. And when we open it up to discussion, almost every time we get a question about Social Security. And so that's why it's so important. My parents just retired. My dad's back up there. If you want to wave. And having seen what retirement meant to go for them, and having to work that few extra years to help pay for health care or other costs, and how important Social Security is now more than ever. And so, and following the lines of Senator Harkin, and he initiated a bill, the Strengthened Social Security Act, and just continuing to push the envelope on what it means for Social Security here in America. And then you hear, like we mentioned earlier, Mitch McConnell just this week saying that he laid out their game plan. This tax bill added $1.9 trillion to the deficit, and they're going after Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid unless we change who's going to Congress. And so that's why there's so many things that are important this November, and Social Security is right at the top. There we go. And so we're making this final push, and I was so happy that we're doing a Social Security forum here in Fort Dodge, because not only is it important here, we're an aging district. I know this district, and it's so important to feel where we're going to be in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And we have a current representative who spends more time worrying about elections in other countries than about this own 4th District. And so that's what we're doing, is being the contrast, getting out there, engaging in the people, and earning votes left and right. And I can't thank everybody enough for what we're doing here, and something special's happening. And before I hand it over to the senator, I just want to let everybody know that this race is going to come down to very razor-thin margins. And we need every help we can get from now until November 6th. And when I launched this campaign, a family friend of mine, he's a Native American activist across the river from me in Sioux City, goes, JD, if you want change, you're going to have to get uncomfortable. And once you get uncomfortable, you have to make everybody else uncomfortable. For the last 15 months, I've been uncomfortable. Last night I slept at the Walmart in my RV. But that's what it's going to take. And if you have, whatever you have, these last little push, was it volunteer or whatever you can do, we'll take whatever you can get, or whatever you have to offer. And I promise you, if you put in that extra little effort, something special is going to happen. And I just read a tweet a couple days ago that said, and I don't believe in a blue wave. I believe in earning votes. And there's a tweet that I read that a blue wave means that if you live within 20 miles of a Whole Foods, you're going to do all right as Democrats. Well, this district doesn't have a Whole Foods. But we live in the land of if you build it, they will come. And we live in a land that if you build the right campaign and go out there and earn it, you're going to earn votes. And we live in a land that if you build it, build something special, Senator Bernie Sanders will come. Please introduce Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. JD, thank you very much. And John, thank you for your great work. The reason that I'm here is I like JD. A month or so ago, we have a list of people who wanted me to campaign for them around the country, and I got on the phone and I talked to a lot of people, and I talked to JD. And here is a straightforward, honest person who is going around his district day and night talking about the real issues, not lying. We see so much dishonesty in politics today, but talking about the real issues impact the working people and the senior citizens of the 4th District of Iowa. Concerned about agriculture, concerned about the kids, concerned about people today who are working 2 or 3 jobs. I just want to say this before I get into the senior issues. Before we got here, we held a little meeting with some folks, and we do this often. When I go out and speak, we meet with some local people, get a sense of what's going on. And it was really, to me, just a mind-blowing meeting. We have a president who tells us how great the economy is. And in truth, for many years, unemployment has been going down, and unemployment is relatively low today, and that's a good thing. But what the president forgets to tell us is that in Iowa, many parts of Vermont, you have people working for $8 or $9 an hour. I just talked to a woman, a single mom, trying to bring up her daughter. Worked for 7 years at $8 an hour, no raises. Talked to a college professor doing important work, having to work part-time in order to, at a Target store, in order to make ends meet and raise her family. And that's what's going on all over this country. You got a Congress today that stays up all night. They're working really hard trying to figure out how they can benefit the wealthy and the powerful. You got a Congress that at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, an issue we have got to deal with. You got 3 people in America owning more wealth than the bottom half of the American people. Anyone think that's right? You got the top 1/10 of 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 90%. You got more than 40% of all new income not going to working people in Vermont or Iowa, going to the top 1%. And JD is saying something very simple but very profound, very radical in a sense. What about having an economy that works for all of us and not just the 1%? And when it comes to senior issues, the reason we wanted to do this meeting, you know, we were in Sioux City last night, and we're going to be in Ames later today, but JD and I wanted to do a meeting with seniors because the issues facing seniors very rarely get public discussion. All right? So what's going on with seniors? Well, it turns out that 1 in 5 seniors in this country is living with an income of $13,500 or less. Think about that. Do the arithmetic. How does somebody live on $13,000 a year or $12,000 a year? How do you keep your house warm in the winter? How do you pay for your deductibles and co-payments and health care? How do you buy the prescription drugs that you need? How do you put gas in the car? How do you pay for insurance for your car? How do you do that? And the answer is you don't. So we have seniors in Iowa, all over this country, my state of Vermont, who are struggling hard, desperately hard, sometimes living alone. Maybe their spouse has died. Maybe they're dealing with depression. Maybe they're dealing with substance abuse. Alcoholism is a serious problem for seniors. Who is paying attention to their needs? And we need candidates in Congress like JD who will do that. Now, you know, one of the things that happens in life is we kind of take things for granted. Social Security is one of the things we take for granted. Oh, it's there. Not a problem. It wasn't always there. Working people in Vermont and Iowa fought to establish Social Security. Because as John said a moment ago, before Social Security, half of the seniors in America lived in poverty. And working people all over this country came together to say, you know what, after a lifetime of hard work, maybe we should be entitled to retire with dignity. And that's what Social Security is about. And let's not forget, way back in the 1930s, you had Republicans telling us Social Security is communism. Social Security is going to take away your freedom. They fought it then, and they are fighting it today. And that's why we need a candidate like JD who's going to stand up for the dignity of seniors so that people can live out their lives in security and dignity. Now, what John said and what JD said a moment ago is absolutely the case. This is the Republican plan. They do not believe in government taking care of ordinary people. The great division in this country right now, people say, why is there so much division in Washington? I will tell you why. Because some of us believe that it is the function of government in a democracy to make sure that our children, our working people, our disabled people, our senior citizens can live with dignity. And then there is another party which is busy giving tax breaks to billionaires that says you are on your own. You're not rich, sorry. Not my problem. That is the division in American politics today. So it should surprise nobody in this room. And by the way, I don't mean to be self-glorifying here. I predicted this before they passed their tax bill. What I said is that the day after they're going to give tax breaks to billionaires and drive up the deficit, this is exactly what JD said, and he's right. Day after they drive up the deficit, they're going to come back to the American people and say, oh my goodness, this deficit is soaring. Of course it's soaring. It's soaring when you give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large private corporations. And then they come back and say, oh, we have this terrible national debt. And the way to cut the debt is to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So I say to seniors here in Iowa, when you turn on the television and you see Paul Ryan talking about entitlement reform, see, they don't have the guts, although Mitch McConnell did. I will give Mitch credit for being a little bit honest. He was more honest than Ryan. And he used the word Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But when Ryan talks about entitlement reform, do you know what they are talking about? They are talking about cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Which then takes me to the President of the United States. Not that I want to go there, but I think it's important to mention. Now, I say this over again, and I don't say it with any joy in my life, in my heart. So but the simple truth is I think most Americans know, we have a president who is a pathological liar. And that means he really, you know, every politician stretches his or her point of view, nothing new about that. But this guy has taken that to a whole new level. And I kind of think that it may well be he does not know the difference between truth and lies. I mean, I think maybe a slight problem that he has. But he went before the people of Iowa and the people of Vermont, people of America. This is what he said. He said, I, Donald Trump, I'm a different type of Republican. Maybe some of you recall this. Said, I'm not literally, said, I'm not Paul Ryan, I'm not Mitch McConnell, I'm not those guys. They want to cut your Social Security and your Medicare and your Medicaid. Not me, I'm not going to do it. Well, the media didn't report a whole lot about it, but the last budget that Trump brought forth called for a $1 trillion cut in Medicaid, a $500 billion cut in Medicare, $72 billion cut in the Social Security Disability Insurance Program. Okay, that's what he did, despite what he said. And John made an important point that everybody should know. When you hear about Medicaid, you're thinking, oh, those are programs for lower-income workers or poor people. They are, and they are life and death for those people. But Medicaid, when your mother or your father has to deal with Alzheimer's or some other terrible, debilitating illness, and your parents are in a nursing home, more often than not, Medicaid is paying that bill. And when you cut $1 trillion out of Medicaid, that bill suddenly goes on your shoulders. And at $90,000 a year, it's going to be very, very difficult for many working families to be able to afford it. That's what Medicaid is doing. And the second issue I want to touch on very briefly is when Trump ran for president, he made a very valid point. And that is, he told us that the pharmaceutical industry, the drug companies, are ripping off the American people, and that the prices of prescription drugs are too high. Well, you know what? He was right. Unfortunately, 2 years later, the cost of prescription drugs in America has soared, gone much higher than it was 2 years ago. Because at the end of the day, Trump will always side with the wealthy and the powerful special interest against the needs of working families. Now, right now, I will tell you a brief story, and then I'm going to give it over to our senior friends here to talk about their experiences. About 20 years ago or so, before I was in the U.S. Senate, I was in the House of Representatives from Vermont. And we went to the northern part of our state, the working class area, and I took a busload of people, mostly women, many of whom who were dealing with breast cancer. These are working class women struggling with a terrible illness. And we got on a bus and we went across the Canadian border. We live 40 miles away from Canada. Went across the Canadian border to Montreal. You know why we went to Montreal? We didn't go sightseeing. We went to Montreal to buy prescription drugs for people who desperately need it. And I will never forget, for the rest of my life, tears coming out of the eyes of these women when they were able to buy drugs like tamoxifen, which is a widely used breast cancer drug, for 1/10 of the price, 10% of the price that they were paying in the United States of America. Drug companies are one of the most greedy institutions in our country today. Last year, the 5 largest drug companies made $50 billion in profit, and yet in Vermont we have senior citizens who cut their pills in half because they can't afford the medicine they need. Just talked to somebody yesterday dealing with diabetes in the family. Price of insulin is soaring. 1 out of 5 Americans today cannot afford the prescription drugs that they need. Can you imagine that? What kind of crazy healthcare system we have? People go to the doctor when they're sick. Doctor diagnoses them, writes out a prescription. 1 out of 5 can't afford it. What happens to them? They end up in the emergency room, they end up in the hospital, maybe they die. How crazy is that? We need members of Congress who have the guts to take on the pharmaceutical industry and substantially lower prices in this country. Last word that I want to say about Medicare. I believe that the time is long overdue for the United States of America to join every other major country on earth and guarantee health care to all as a right, not a privilege. I'm tired about hearing about the privatization of Medicaid here in Iowa. I'm tired about hearing 30 million Americans with no health insurance, and many of you who may have health insurance are underinsured. And that is why we have got to finally say that every man, woman, and child in this country deserves health care as a human right, which is why we're going to expand Medicare to cover all through a Medicare for all single-payer program. Now, you can understand that Medicare for all, that concept of health care is a right, of dealing with the absurdity of the United States, and I want everybody to know this. The United States now spends twice as much per capita on health care as the people of any other country. Do you all know that? 30 million uninsured, more underinsured, highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. We spend almost twice as much as any other country. Now, Trump understands that the fight for Medicare for all is gaining steam. And right now, the last poll that I saw, 70% of the American people support Medicare for all. So that is why you're seeing all over this country dishonest ads attacking those of us, Bernie Sanders and others, who support Medicare for all. And one of the things they're saying, which I wanted to touch on, is they're saying, well, this Medicare for all will mean lower benefits, worse benefits for seniors. That is an absolute lie. The legislation that we have brought forward will expand benefits for seniors, not lower them. And let me give you 3 examples. Medicare is a very good program, but the seniors here know that Medicare does not cover dental care. All right? And many seniors have serious dental problems. Many seniors need dentures. They don't have the money to pay for that. Medicare today does not cover hearing aids, which is another big issue, and Medicare does not cover eye care and eyeglasses. Our legislation expands Medicare benefits for seniors by covering dental care, by covering vision care, and by covering hearing aids. And when people say we can't afford to do that, when you are spending twice as much per capita as any other nation on health care, you damn well can afford to expand and improve benefits for seniors. All right, that's enough from me. Now we got a great panel, and we're very happy that you are here. We have Jerry McGowan and Claudia Koch and Sharon Vogel and Joe Condon. Jerry, why don't you begin it?
Well, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say. The other thing, there's 2 things. Is first of all, it's a pleasure being here with Senator and JD, and I know JD, and I follow Senator Sanders because he's one of my heroes. The other thing is this gentleman next to me, and he talked about how nervous we was when we get up here. And I said, don't worry, Joe. If they ask me a question I can't answer, I'm going to turn it over to you. and he tried to leave at that time. I don't know how long I'm supposed to talk, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from Texas, if you hadn't figured that out by listening to me. And I worked for a company for 40 years, which was oil and gas and chemical consortium, and paid into Social Security and Medicare the whole time. And then I retired in 2000, and I came up here because my wife is from up here, and I said, well, I'm not going to do anything because, I've worked a long time. I'm tired. And I sat down at the table for about 3 weeks, and I was so bored, I told my wife, I said, I got to get another job because if I don't, you and I are going to get in a fist fight right here in the kitchen. So I opened up a car lot, and they had calculated my pension and said, Jerry, you worked 40 years, and here's your pension, no more Social Security payment. and opened up a car lot, and I found out that that was wrong. So I had to pay Social Security again, which is okay. Until I found out that in my car lot, I was the owner and the employee. So I paid, both sides of that, which is okay. And then when that went away, we did the same thing again. I'm sitting around the house. What are we going to do? And I started driving a Midas school bus, which, by the way, was great. The Social Security that we have, my wife and I have, has helped us. We would not have made it without Social Security. I had heart surgery 2 years ago, and excuse me, and it paid. I'm sorry. It paid for everything, and luckily I had a supplemental policy that paid the other part. So I had a major surgery, heart surgery, and between the 80% that Social Security paid and the supplement, my cost was. So we got to have it. We got to have it. The other thing I want to say is, all everybody in here know that you're going to get a raise here in January, right? When you Social Security. And you had one in 4 or 5 years, but isn't that right? But we're going to get a raise, and it's going to be 2.8%. Now, to put that in perspective, if your monthly Social Security payment is $800, that's $20 a month. So that's not even enough to fill your car up with gas. And when I heard that, it's the same day on the news I heard of this lady saying that she is so perplexed because she's got to work 2 jobs because her husband, as a politician, only makes $174,000 a year, and she can't afford another house. And I'm saying, what is wrong with this picture? And I know that Social Security can't pay at the level that people make, but you got to have it. And you can't get it repealed. We got to have it. We're not. If everybody in this room, in some form or another, if you don't have it, you're in trouble. And I made a real good salary for 40 years, but I had to have it. So I want to just say that I appreciate Bernie and JD, and we've got to have help. We've got to keep this going. And the other thing that I don't understand is he mentioned, Senator Sanders mentioned dental care and hearing aids and all that. There is if you look at the economics of that, what happens when your teeth get bad? You get other diseases, right? So that's actually a cost cut. If you pay for the teeth, you won't have the infections and the stuff that you do. Okay? And hearing aids, I don't know if anybody's priced any hearing aids, but they're around $6,000. Got a subject right over here. $6,000. It's got a microchip in it that's probably 27 cents when it's performed. Okay. And then I'm taking too much time, but I want to just say that when I heard Bowser was here, I looked all over the parking lot, tried to find that '56 Oldsmobile that he stood up in. Which, by the way. In 1956, you know when you did the ad, 1956, that car was $2,500. Anybody in here buy a new car for, it's hard to buy one for $25,000 now, right? So anyway, I've had a good life, and I appreciate it, and thank you.
See if this one works. Yeah, that one works. Use this one. Okay, when JD said that he had to get uncomfortable, I'm getting uncomfortable for you. Okay? My name is Claudia Cook. I live in Fort Dodge. And yes, I'm happily retired. And to be able to be happily retired, obviously, takes money. And so I'm very fortunate. I've been a teacher for almost 40 years in 2 different states. And so I have a pension from IPERS, which we need to take care of. I also have a pension from Illinois, which every time I get an email from them, I think, uh-oh, here it goes. But between that and my Social Security, I have a reasonable pension that keeps me going fairly well. I've been fairly healthy, so I haven't had to use too much. I haven't had any terrible experiences with Medicaid, with Medicare, and in fact, it's quite good. We do have a supplement, and the supplement helps tremendously, but they are going up and up, as many of you may know. And so that's a concern I have. The other thing is, and it was been talked about, is number 1, vision is not included. I have the beginning of macular degeneration, so that may be my big expense through life, and right now, not much covers that. My husband says I have poor hearing. I think it's selective. But to be honest, I've thought about going to get hearing aids to see if that would help, and then I look at the price tag. And I know it all comes out of my pocket. And, you know, so he can yell a little louder. I have, as far as pharmaceuticals, I take several drugs. The costs are pretty high. I have one medicine that I have that literally out of pocket for me is $60. And I went to the pharmacist and I said, is this not covered? Is there some problem here? She goes, no, it costs $300. It's just a little tube. I looked to see if the screw cap was made of gold, but it's not. So, I mean, there are some real difficulties we're facing, and I really think that we need to get JD in office so that we can make some changes here, because everybody here should have a good life, including their senior years. So that's what I have to tell you.
Hello, my name is Sharon Vogel. I am not drawing Social Security yet because I own my own business. And thank God it's doing well, and so I don't see a reason why Social Security should write me checks just so I can write them back a check to pay it back when they tell me that I can only earn X number of dollars. So when I turned 70, by the way, the criteria for sitting at the table was you have to be 65. And so I'm a few years past that, but I'm not 70 yet. And so when I get there, I will draw my Social Security, and hopefully I'll still be able to work. I am hard of hearing. I do have hearing aids in both ears, and they cost a lot of money. Mine have lasted, thank God, for over 3 years, but I feel like that when I go back, the initial price of $2,500 per ear will probably be a lot more the second time around. So I'm not looking forward to that. I have a real problem with prescription drugs because I know that we just recently have passed a law that allows pharmacists to tell you when the drug price is lower than your copay on your Social Security, on your Medicare drug plan. And so a drug that you could pay $2 for, $4 for, the drug plan that you use, which I feel is being run by the pharmaceuticals and the insurance company, they're charging you more. They're charging Medicare more for those drugs. This past year, I take a medication that the insurance company decided they don't want to cover anymore. And so they said, well, you can take this one, or this one, but you can't take the one that you're taking now. So my doctor and I, we worked out. I said, okay, fine, I'll try it. I tried one of the three. I took it for 14 days, and it was horrible. And so the doctor makes notation in your chart and sends that notation back to Medicare to see if then I can take my drug of choice. They said, no, you need to try one of the other two. And so we try another drug for 14 days, which has a lot of side effects for me. And then he makes another notation in the chart. And yes, they finally allow me to take the drug that I've always been taking for probably the last 7-8 years. I know that my father-in-law, who had a heart condition, he hit the donut hole in the medication about May, where he had to pay for his own drugs. Fortunately, I don't take that many drugs, and so I just hit my donut hole here in October. But it's very difficult to come up with the extra dollars every month that seem to come, and that doesn't even take care of the everyday little emergencies that happen, the battery that dies, the new brake job, shopping for a new used car. I mean, all of those things are life, and they happen. And so we have to scurry to pool together the money to make it work for us. And I know that's a story that happens with every one of you that are sitting out there. So thank you very much.
Let me thank our panelists. I've heard more honesty and more... Oh, I'm sorry.
He was hoping you'd miss him anyway.
Best for last.
I thought I made it, but I guess I didn't. My name is Joe Condon, and my wife Diane and I have, we've got 5 sons. It's not closer. Ooh. We have 5 sons and 8 grandchildren and 1 granddaughter out of that 8, but we've got another one coming in March, so maybe another girl. I want to just touch on what Bernie had brought out real explicitly, that the medical cost, I take one prescription for my diabetes, and it's Toshiba, and it's a good product, does well. And the first time it was filled, I asked the doctor just to do it for 1 month as so he could see where I would be. In the first month, it was $22.63. And since it worked good, why we went to the 3 months. And when I went to pay for that, my copay was $256, which equates to $86. And then for some reason, I went back to the monthly, and it was $60 until just yesterday, or 2 days ago, I refilled it again, and it went to $173.17 for 1 month. So it's gone up 3 times in less than a year. And I think we just need to address this, like the senator says, and we need to straighten these pharmaceutical companies out. And then, and another sidebar is I have a grandson who has the peanut allergy, and his son has good insurance, but that went from like, it's $600 now, and he has to have a set at home and a set at school, and that's just unbearable for that to do. Would be like someone with me with, if I had to have that, you just couldn't do it. And the co-pays like that are just gone way out of hand here. And I'll just end with this. My son reminded me a vote for R is for reverse, and a vote for D is for drive.
Did everybody speak?
Yes.
All right. Joe, I'm sorry. And I'm so happy that Joe said what he did. Because what he said basically is we are the only country on earth where the drug companies can charge any price they want for any reason. There's not a rationale for it. It's just they can get it. So you walk into the pharmacy tomorrow, price could be twice as high for no reason other than these guys want to make billions more in profit. Let me just conclude before we bring up John again to end the discussion by picking up on the point that JD made when he began. I happen not to believe that there's going to be this great blue wave. I happen to believe that on election night, which party controls the U.S. House will come down to a very few seats, and one of those seats could be the 4th congressional district here in Iowa. So as JD said, what we have to do in the next 2 weeks is work really, really hard. And that means not only come out and vote, but make sure that our friends and family and coworkers come out to vote for a whole lot of reasons. This election, in fact, is the most important midterm election in the modern history of this country. That is really what it is. So if you love this country, let's come out and vote. Let's elect JD as the next congressman from the district.
I've been waiting for this moment for a really long time. So we are going to have a closing song. And, you know, it's been a wonderful discussion. I hope did you have a good time? Did you learn something? And there is so much more to learn. You know, I have spent a lot of time now educating myself as an expert in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. These are complex programs to understand, but they work. They work. And this talk about Medicare tonight, you know, the idea of Medicare for all, just think about the 1.4% overhead that Medicare, most of us think that, you know, the Affordable Care Act made good progress by limiting your insurance company's ability to take more than 20% of your dollar for their massive CEO pay and putting their name on the building. That's still 20%. Medicare has 1.4% overhead. A lot less. And Medicare already covers the most difficult part of the population to cover, the oldest and most disabled part of the population. So for it to cover the easier part of the population is not really that big of a stretch. Just something to think about. But, I don't even need this mic. There's one over here. Because this is a moment I have truly waited for a long time. You'll see why. Yes, clap along, but really I want you to sing along. At the end of the Shot It On television show, we always sang a song called Good Night, Sweetheart, Well, It's Time to Go. night we might change the lyrics a little bit. I'm here because JD Scholten is going to be a great congressman. And I'm also here for what we're about to sing. Ready? Join me. Do-do-do-do-do. Good night, Steve King. Well, it's time to go. Do-do-do-do. Good night, Steve King. Well, it's time to go. Do-do-do-do. Don't hate to leave you, but we really must say, let me hear you. Good night, Steve King. Good night. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Good night, Steve King. Good night. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Good night, Steve King. Vote for JD Scholten. And Grease for peace. It's fun, but it's also true.